Good evening, and welcome to TMI Live number 33, I believe. Give me a second to get going here. So yeah, welcome to TMI Live number 33, reading McLuhan, annotating McLuhan, because you have to call it something, or maybe you don't, I don't know. I'm back another Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, in Eric McLuhan's library, and I am inventorying his 6,000 or so books. I'm a small percentage of the way in, something like maybe 10%, maybe 5%, I don't know. Anyway, I'm on the McLuhan shelves, which are these shelves here. This case, the case beside it, the case beside that, 6 shelves up, 3 shelves deep. And it's all Eric McLuhan's collected copies, editions of his and Marshall's work. Does that say Rain? Hey, say Rain. And my mom is watching. Hey, Mom. So welcome here. Before I start, or as I start, I'd just like to say rest in peace to my friend Sergio Roncallo Dow from Bogota, who passed away last week quite suddenly, and he is greatly missed. And I'd like to extend my deepest heartfelt condolences to his friends and family, to my friends down there in Bogota. I miss you guys, and hopefully I'll see you again before too long. Also, thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you're all well in this crazy time, or as well as can be, and being smart and safe and healthy. Myself, I've just been going back and forth from our house to the library here with no stops in between, and that's how I'm staying safe and isolating of sorts. Thanks for joining me tonight. So, also thank you to my Patreon supporters, whose very generous donations every month help me spend more time doing this McLuhan stuff, of which there's a lot doing. Edward, hey man, I just gave you guys a shout out. Good to see you. Special shout outs to my friend Eric, who joined as a Patreon subscriber a few days ago, very generously. Thank you so much. It's much appreciated. So, without further ado, if you're new here, if you haven't seen this before, I'm going through these books and I'm making an inventory in an Excel spreadsheet. It's pretty basic. There's probably a better way to do it. Hey, Jarrett, Winnipeg represent. But I'm just making a note of the basic publishing information. And then I'm also noting any special contents, or whether there's any annotation, what degree of annotation, whatever makes a book special. Just so I have it for my records, and for other people who can't come visit the library as well, so I can search the database later. I did this same work with Marshall's library about 10 years ago. Speaking of Marshall, I thought I would share something interesting this week, which I don't think anybody's seen before, as I'm on the McLuhan shelves. These are we have a lot of copies of Understanding Media in here, as you might imagine. Copies in English and also foreign editions. Publishers used to send a copy of foreign editions as they came out. I don't know if they still do that. Probably. So we have a lot of those hanging around. An example of that is Understanding Media in Arabic, I believe. One of these days I'll get a fancy camera and everything won't be backwards. Until then, if you know or don't know, you won't know, but this is apparently the Arabic edition of Understanding Media. I have a couple copies here. And this is another, I think this is Czech from Czechoslovakia, Prague. But the copies I wanted to show you today are a little more interesting, a bit more special. One thing publishers also used to do from time to time is when you published a big book, they would send you a leather-bound copy. Here we have Marshall McLuhan's presentation copy of Understanding Media, first edition, 1964, handsomely bound in red leather with the fancy end papers and all, and a little note inside from the McGraw-Hill Book Company, December 16th, 1964. Dr. Marshall McLuhan, Director, Centre for Culture and Technology, University of Toronto, 5, Canada. Dear Dr. McLuhan, on behalf of all your friends here at McGraw-Hill, I take pleasure in sending you this rather handsome addition to your library. Please accept our best wishes for a happy holiday season. Sincerely yours, A.I. Hart, Jr., Senior Editor. So I guess it was a Christmas present. Anyway, in our collection here, I have leather-bound copies of several of Marshall's works, which are just nice additions. They're not marked up. Actually, that's wrong. This one is marked up. Marshall has made note of a typo. It says typo 346. Page 346. And the typo is, drum roll please, automation. Whoa, no, okay, now that's spooky. Chapter 33, TMI Live number 33, I swear I didn't plan this. 33, chapter 33, automation, learning a living, and the typo down here at the bottom, the future of work consists of earning a living in the automation age. And Marshall has circled earning, and over here added an L. The title here is Automation Learning a Living, so that's the typo. And that's weird that it's chapter 33, and this happens to be TMI Live number 33. What's kind of interesting about that is that suggests that Marshall read this whole book again and only made the one note, and that's kind of bizarre. The other two copies I wanted to show you are these two here, and I've recently I like to use these when I'm putting up pictures online. Here we got, hey Brian, oh hey Dan. I like to put up these copies because they're kind of cool additions to show. And I'll speak, I guess, about this one first because this is the earlier edition. This is the second printing. I don't know what that means in terms of dates. 1965, but I'm just guessing. The really interesting thing about this, and I don't know enough about the print runs to know how many of the printings had this dust jacket. But the cool thing about this, at least to me, is that in the jacket here, there's a credit down here, and the credit is Jacket Margaret Larson, Howard Gossage. And that's pretty cool because Howard Gossage is a figure that looms large in the McLuhan world. It's a long story, but you can look up a little bit about it. Tom Wolfe wrote a book called The Pump House Gang, and there's a chapter in the Pump House Gang that talks, that's on the scene with Marshall and Gossage in San Francisco, and that's a really neat read. I'm pretty sure you can look it up online if you want to. That's The Pump House Gang by Tom Wolfe, and that's all about actually, well, the Pump House Gang refers to Howard Gossage and Jerry Fagan and their ad agency, marketing agency in San Francisco in the 60s, which is notable in the McLuhan world because it's Howard Gossage that kind of decided to make McLuhan famous. And then he went and did that, and that's really awesome. So I wanted to look quickly at these books because here at the top here we have Corinne, which is Corinne McLuhan, and that's written in her handwriting. So this was her copy. The really interesting thing about this, and I should do a longer study of it, is that at the top here it says penciled in notes are for UMR. And I have a feeling some of these notes are Eric McLuhan's handwriting, including that, because he and Marshall worked together on UMR. UMR stands for Understanding Media Revised, which was it started as a project to update Understanding Media, revise it for a 10th anniversary edition. But it ended up turning into a whole other book, which Eric would publish in 1988, called Laws of Media, The New Science. This is a really cool copy because, so as you can tell from that note, the penciled in notes are for UMR. And that starts with the chapter list. And Understanding Media is two main parts. Part one is techniques for understanding media. Part two is examples of media understood. That's an awkward way to put it, but it's a closer look at some major technologies. The spoken word, the written word, paper, print, comics, wheel, bicycle, airplane, phonograph, games, telegraph, typewriter, blah, 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 33 chapters. But then the really neat thing, oh yeah, okay, so that's interesting too. Here between chapter 20 and 21, chapter 20 is the photograph, the brothel without walls. Chapter 21 is press, government by news leak. But here in between chapters 20 and 21, Marshall has made an insert and added the word sex. So he was going to talk about sex. In chapter 13 here, housing, new look and new outlook, he's added the word and city. But what's really neat is after chapter 33, he's added a whole bunch of chapter titles, which presumably he was going to add into the revised edition. And we have chapter 34, Cyclops, chapter 35, Satellite, the end of nature. There's also a notation here, C/A, which means cliche to archetype. Chapter 36, Vatican II. Chapter 37, cliche to archetype. Chapter 38, hardware, software. Chapter 39, RVM, meaning rear view mirror. See also retrieval of ancient. Chapter 40, global theater. By this time, Marshall had moved to using the term global theater to describe the information technology environment over global village, which he realized was more apt to describe radio. Global theater is the satellite world. He wrote that essay in 1957. Sputnik went around the world and blah, 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 global theater. Anyway, that's the dividing line between global village and global theater is 1957, although Marshall didn't realize it until later, late 60s or 70s anyway, which is interesting. Chapter 41, East-West, ear for eye. Chapter 42, Hertz, Hertz. Chapter 43, quid. I'm not sure what that says. Anyway, I usually try to keep these things to 15 minutes, but I'm obviously going to blow through that today. Going through this book, there are annotations throughout. margin notes, more notes in the headings, a little typo or corrections like that. What's interesting is at this point in UMR, they're still revising Understanding Media. They haven't yet realized they're doing Laws of Media, which is a completely separate book. And I'm not 100% sure whether that was a publisher choice. I know they said this, the publishers told them, you're not talking about a revised edition here, you're talking about a new book. But at this point, as you can tell with the chapter headings and everything, they're still on the UMR phase of things. I have a transcript of a recording that's really cool. That's Marshall and Eric doing the UMR thing and going through a bunch of file folders. I think talking about this, I'll have to compare side to side. But I want to get on to the other book as well. This is a later edition. This is a 5th printing, but I think Marshall had this one first. Anyway, this one Marshall inscribed to Corinne, which I would think meant he had it earlier. Anyway, Corinne has her name up here, but Marshall writes here, "For all extensions of me that can never be loved or thanked as she deserves from her proud husband, Marshall." For all? Yeah. There you go. And sorry, it's backwards. If there's a way I can flip that around, somebody can tell me. I don't know. I love this. This also includes the preface to the 3rd printing, which if you have a later edition of Understanding Media, it's in there. If you don't, you really should seek it out, because Marshall expands on hot and cold media and various other things, which is very helpful, I find. The medium is the message means in terms of the electronic age that a totally new environment has been created. Which is great. Here at the top, he has an annotation. This is the preface. "Understanding is not a point of view," which is very good. Here again, this actually is more heavily annotated than the first example I showed you. And it has a lot more notes and weird stuff. So I'll get to that in a sec. There's some cool, back to the table of contents in this one. Hey Diego. Dan, so these chapters were not written. I'm not 100% sure. There may be more notes, but no, I don't think like the ones that I listed were written out. But I could be wrong. Yeah, this is very strange. Here's a note. It says, "Use LOM, use Laws of Media." So this marked up copy is later than this, because he's talking Laws of Media already, and that I should look into that. I don't have an answer to my own question of when they started using Laws of Media as opposed to UMR, but in the earliest printings of Laws of Media, which I think started to appear in 73 or 74. The first English appearance was in the Journal of General Semantics, etc., I think. and I think that was 1974, but it could have been 73. The first printing of any laws of media material was actually in a German publication in German, which is kind of bizarre. But people didn't know what to make. People still don't know what to make of laws of media. I know it wasn't an easy thing to get it printed, even in etc., general semantics. I know there was a bit of discussion, and Paul Levinson advocated for it, which was nice. Thank you, Paul. Actually, Paul, I should email you. I found a letter of yours over there. Yeah, this is weird. They went through, this is Marshall's handwriting, this list, and I don't know if you can make it out with the reverse type, but it goes through the chapter list, and the annotations are RH or LH, right hemisphere or left hemisphere. Marshall and Eric were very concerned with the hemispheres of the brain, especially having to do with media, with technologies at the time, where they felt that, if I have this right, print was a left hemisphere thing, and that visual space is a left hemisphere thing, and acoustic space is a right hemisphere thing. They were, judging by the chapter list, going to go into that much more. But all the chapter headings in this edition have many, many, many notes for revision up here. And someday, when I have a lot more time, I will maybe do a much deeper look, unpacking of this for people to see, because there isn't enough time. Do it now. Here's an inclusion. At the end of the chapter on television, there's a clipping from the New York Times, December 6th, 1970. I think that's 70. Rabbinical court in Israel punishes owner of TV set. All kinds of good stuff. And then at the end here, there's quite a few endnotes. You're welcome, Dan. Page 26, effect involves total situation. Oh yeah, here was one reason why I was very interested in this book. And it's another project I want to do, is that 28, don't know if you can make it out, but 28 media ecology. Down at the bottom here it says ecology again, but 28 media ecology. What's on page 28? I've been low-key working on an article. Yeah, here it is. On an article on what media ecology meant to Marshall and Eric McLuhan. For Eric, it's not too hard to know because he talked about media ecology quite a bit. His last speech, delivered the day before he died in Bogota, 2018, was called Media Ecology in the 21st Century. So we know what Eric thought about media ecology. Marshall, on the other hand, a little bit less definite, because things like the Media Ecology Association were not around until much, much, much later. I mean, the MEA is 20 years old now, 21 years old or something. Anyway, back on page 28, we have Marshall's margin annotation, Media Ecology. Beside this passage, which I'll read and then close this out. Margaret Mead is thinking here of change as uniform speed up of motion or a uniform hotting up of temperatures in backward societies. We are certainly coming within conceivable range of a world automatically controlled to the point where we could say, quote, 6 hours less radio in Indonesia next week, or there will be a great falling off in literary attention, or we can program 20 more hours of TV in South Africa next week to cool down the tribal temperature raised by radio last week. Whole cultures could now be programmed to keep their emotional climate stable in the same way that we have begun to know something about maintaining equilibrium in the commercial economies of the world. So that's what Marshall thought of media ecology, not theory, not academics, but actual control over the effects of technologies. That obviously is a very crude imagining in examples, slightly cringy, the whole Indonesia, South Africa tribal thing, but he meant no harm by it, as I'm sure you know. And, it's to the point that he believed that we weren't helpless, that we got ourselves into our mess, we could get ourselves out of our mess and be a bit smarter. And that seems an appropriate way to end things during this COVID-19 mess. Polanda. Hey, Eduardo. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I hope you stay safe and healthy out there. I'm really, really sad at the loss of my friend Sergio. And again, my love to his friends and family. And we'll see y'all soon. Okay? Next week, I'll be back. Join me then. Good night.